Tell him to join, and I'm going to be. Oh, but that means.
Huh? To stay on it.
That means I have to stay on. I can't. Oh, there's Rav Fink. Okay, Rav Fink. I need to speak to him. So.
Here, you want to talk to him?
Okay. Okay. Hi, Rav Fink. Hello? Do you hear me? I don't know what I don't hear him talking.
You know what?
Okay, now you should hear me.
Sorry.
Okay,
Okay, Rav Fink,
yes,
I'm making you, this is Yael Dworkin, and I'm making you host because I can't stay on right now.
okay,
I'm making you host. You are now the host, so you're controlling the admitting everybody in, and
okay, so I have to click
you
admit
know
to
what, in
class.
your settings, I'm gonna get rid of the admit button, but it's not gonna be for this class. The subsequent class people are just gonna be admitted automatically.
Mhm,
I'm gonna get rid of the waiting room.
mhm.
And do you know how to live stream to YouTube?
No, I
This is so
don't.
interesting. Oh, no. Okay, so I'm going to be, you're being recorded, so that's okay.
Okay,
And I'm just gonna leave the meeting. So have a great meeting, everybody. And I'll
okay.
put it on
Thanks for
recording.
your help. You finally got me online. That's good.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. It's finally, I'm finally online. It took me a while to get this straight, and we're ready to begin our regular halacha shir. We're talking about Shmitta for a few sessions. We'll have other topics after Shmitta, and let me ask you to send to me by email. Let me get my chat. Oh, here we got chat. Here's my email address. You have my email address on chat. So send me the topics that you're interested in covering after we complete a few series, a few sessions on Shmitta. Then we'll be able to cover other issues in halacha that interest you. Now, as far as Shmitta is concerned, I'm going to share screen. I think I know how to do that. Share screen. And here we go. Share. Okay. I'm going to copy the link, and I'm going to add the link to chat. How do I do that? Chat. Here you have the source sheet on chat if you want to download that for yourself. Let's begin with the sources. The issue that we want to talk about today is how to treat kedushat shvi'it. You buy fruits or vegetables which have kedusha. What are you supposed to do with them? How do you treat them? Well, alternatively, you go directly to the pardes, directly to the orchard, and pluck your own, and you bring it home, which you're allowed to do because during the Shmitta year, all of the farmland is hefker, is declared ownerless, and you're allowed to go pluck your own. And if you find that the gate to the orchard is locked, so there should be a sign there where you can get the key so you can harvest your own apples or whatever and take them home. What do you do with the stuff once you get it home? Now, the discussion has to divide into two basic categories. Category number one, fruits. Anything which is a perennial, a tree which grows, you don't have to plant it every year because every year it continues to produce more fruit. That's a perennial, that's a fruit, perpetuates, as opposed to vegetables, annuals, which have to be planted every year. Now, I know that what people call vegetable and what people call fruit might vary from country to country and place to place, but the real thing is not what people call a fruit or what people call a vegetable. The real issue here is what has to be planted every year. Something which has to be replanted every year is an annual. Those are halachically vegetables. Things which grow year after year are halachically fruits, and all is well. Now, if we're talking about vegetables, an annual plant which has to be replanted every year, the plants which are harvested during the Shmitta year at the moment, for example, have kedusha: carrots, cucumbers, squash, anything which has to be planted every year and gets harvested now has kedusha, and the rules and regulations we're about to discuss apply to such carrots or cucumbers or whatever, tomatoes. On the other hand, if the vegetable was harvested before Rosh Hashanah, and there's still plenty of stuff in the market now, which was harvested before Rosh Hashanah. After all, root vegetables like potatoes have a very long shelf life after they've been harvested. And if it was harvested during the Shmitta year, before the Shmitta year, before Rosh Hashanah, well, it has no kedusha at all, and you can treat it as you like. So as far as vegetables are concerned, Borei Pri Adama, anything which is harvested this year has kedusha. Harvested last year, not. And you'll see in many greengrocers a little sign by the potatoes, typically root vegetables, which will say shishit, 6th year, harvested in the 6th year, has been in cold storage since then, and therefore no Shmitta issue at all. But the stuff which was harvested this year does have is Shmitta. Of course, all this applies only to produce which grew in Eretz Yisrael. Anything which is imported from abroad, chul is what they usually write on the sign. Well, if it's from Chutz La'aretz, so there's no kedusha of Shmitta there, and you can treat the fruits and vegetables as you like. Okay, all that has to do with vegetables. The whole status of the vegetable depends upon when it is plucked from the ground, when it is harvested. Fruits, on the other hand, Borei Pri Ha'etz, namely anything which grows on a tree that does not have to be planted every year, because every year it just continues to produce more fruit. If we have fruits, the kedusha of the fruits does not depend on when they are harvested. Rather, it depends upon when they blossom. Fruits, apples, pears, oranges, fruits which blossom during the Shmitta year have kedusha, even if they will not be harvested until after next Rosh Hashanah, when it is no longer Shmitta. It's the time of blossoming which establishes whether or not a fruit has kedusha or not. And therefore, any fruit, apples, pears, any fruit which is being harvested now surely blossoms well before Rosh Hashanah. After all, the growing cycle is months for these fruits. Therefore, of course, they blossomed before Rosh Hashanah and have no kedusha at all. And therefore, as far as fruits are concerned, there's no issue of kedusha at the moment for any of them. It will be a couple of months until fruits that blossom during the Shmitta year become ripe and ready for harvest. It'll be a few months until that happens. There's one exception to this rule, and that's etrogim. The etrogim, although they are fruits, the etrog tree lasts for many, many years and continues to produce fruit every year. Although they're fruits, the etrog, unlike all other fruits, follows the rule of vegetables. It depends upon when it's plucked. And therefore, well, the etrogim which were marketed for Sukkot this year, were of course harvested before Rosh Hashanah. No problem at all. But if you go to an orchard and pluck your own etrog now, it'll have kedusha, even though it's a fruit. Okay, so at the
Excuse me,
moment,
Rabbi, before you continue, could you
Yes.
please, you didn't say anything about nuts. You talked about vegetables
nuts
and
are
fruits.
fruits. Well, nuts are fruits aside from peanuts. Peanuts are not really nuts. Peanuts grow in the ground and have to be planted every year. Peanuts are annual plants. They have to be planted every year. They are technically, halakhically vegetables. Aside from peanuts, all other nuts, walnuts, almonds, pistachios, all other nuts grow on trees that last for many years. And therefore, any nut which is being marketed now surely blossomed before Rosh Hashanah. As far as tobacco is concerned, well, as far as tobacco is concerned, tobacco is not edible, and the rules of Shmitta, at least I hope it's not edible, the rules for Shmitta apply only to edible stuff, and therefore tobacco or other inedible besamim, any inedible besamim, no problem at all with Shmitta. On the other hand, herbs which are edible, I mean, that's why you add them to the food, there the rules of Shmitta apply, and most herbs have to be planted every year, and therefore the time of plucking determines whether or not they have Shmitta, and that's most herbs are annual plants that have to be planted every year. Now, we've got the holy Shmitta fruits or vegetables already in the house. We bought them. Now the question is, what are you allowed to do with it? Or what is prohibited? Well, we begin with the Sifra, the second source on the sheet. Since I made the order, I can change the order. I want to go in chronological order. I don't know why I put the Sifra second. That's just a mistake. The Sifra comes from the days of the Mishnah. The great rabbis of the Mishnaic period divided their writings, well, all traditions, into two bodies. There's the Mishnah and all the stuff which is in the Sifra. The difference between the Sifra and the Mishnah is that the Mishnah follows subject matter order. All the stuff about Shmita is in one tractate, all the stuff about Sukkot is in one tractate, all the stuff about Shabbos is in one tractate. The Sifra, on the other hand, by the same rabbis who gave us the Mishnah, goes in the order of the verses in the Torah. It's a kind of midrash, a halachic midrash. What it says in the Sifra follows the verses of the Torah, so it always begins by quoting a verse. Hashvi'it tishmatena natashta v'achlu evyonei amecha. The land must be declared ownerless during the Shemitah year, so that anyone can come into the fields, harvest for himself or harvest for herself, the apples or the cucumbers, the tomatoes or whatever, take it home. V'achlu evyonei amecha. The poor people are welcome to come, harvest their own tomatoes, take them home and eat them. Therefore, the Sifra concludes, Hara'ui la'adam, hara'ui la'behema. It's not only food which is fit for human consumption that falls under the rules of Shmita, also food which is fit only for animal consumption. Farmers grow plenty of crops for humans, but they grow other crops for animals, and it doesn't matter whether it's grown for animals or whether it's grown for humans. If it's edible, then it has the kedusha of Shmita, and all the rules we're going to learn apply to it. This then leads to the position of the Tosafot. The Tosafot explains, Perot shvi'it la'achila, l'shtia, u'lasika. The only legitimate uses of kedusha fruits, of shvi'is fruits, are number one, eating, number two, drinking, and number three, sika, rubbing the skin to be absorbed in the skin. As you know, on Yom Kippur, one of the prohibitions of Yom Kippur is rubbing anything on the skin, which will be absorbed by the skin. Absorption through the skin is, in a sense, similar to drinking. That's surely true. As far as Yom Kippur is concerned, that's why you're not allowed to drink on Yom Kippur. You're not allowed to rub things on the skin. And it's true as far as Shmitta is concerned as well. The holy fruits of the Shmitta year, you're allowed to eat them, drink them, or apply them to the skin to be absorbed that way. V'lo nishar dvar. There is no other legitimate use of produce of the Shmitta year. Asur l'flo mehem chavot. You owe someone money, you cannot offer Shmitta produce to settle your debts. That's an illegitimate use. You're using it for a purpose other than eating, drinking, or rubbing on the skin. That you're simply not allowed to do. Among other things you're not allowed to do with it is sell it. You're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to drink it, you're allowed to apply it to the skin. Those are the only permissible uses. Among the other prohibitions, therefore, is you're not allowed to sell it. You're beginning to wonder, how is it possible that they're selling it in the market? How is it possible that Machane Yehuda or other markets are full of this stuff? Well, that's a mystery to which I have no answer. There is no good explanation for why that is okay. But a lot of things are happening in the world which are not okay, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it at the moment. But you're not allowed to use the fruits for any other purpose aside consumption. And consumption has three forms: eating, drinking, and applying to the skin. Ein mispar l'dinim v'isurim shebepera shvius. The list of prohibitions is endless. The list of things which are permitted is very short, only three things. That's what the Tosafot teaches us, and all of the subsequent poskim embrace this position. Now, as far as marketing Shmitta products is concerned, there is one or two tricks which can be employed. The Gemara discusses the problem of buying etrogim on the Shmitta year. It's a mitzvah. Every family wants at least one etrog. And if the etrogim have kedusha, how are you supposed to buy them? I mean, the merchants don't want to give them away for free. That's their whole livelihood. The solution suggested by the Gemara, which is embraced by all the poskim, of course, the suggestion is as follows: don't do it. Do not sell the etrog. Give the etrog away for free. And the way to give the etrog away for free, the way recommended by the Gemara, is as follows: sell the customer simultaneously. Sell the customer an etrog and a lulav. Lulav is, of course, not edible. Therefore, the laws of Shmitta do not apply to the lulav. Charge the customer a lot for the lulav, but give him the etrog for free. Now the merchant has covered his profit. He's now making a huge profit on the lulav, and he's giving away the etrog for free. Everyone understands that the reason he's doing that is not because he's really in the business of selling lulavim. He's a farmer and he grew the etrogim, and that's his livelihood for himself and his family for the whole year. But this is a kosher way for the farmer to be able to sell his etrogim and make a lot of money. It's called havla'ah. Let's get that typed correctly on chat. Havla'ah, swallowing up. The etrog, which has kedusha, gets swallowed up in a bigger sale, part of a bigger sale, and the money is not specifically going for the etrog. And therefore, people who are going to buy holy fruits of the Shmitta year, holy produce of the Shmitta year in the market, would be wise to buy at least two products simultaneously. When you pay, you're paying not only for the Shmitta carrots or whatever has Shmitta Kedusha, buy something else at the same time which doesn't. And then, at least from the point of view of the customer, all is well. You'll say to yourself, you're not actually paying for the carrots, you're paying a single global price for the carrots and the apples have no Kedusha at the moment, and all is well. But that'll save the customer from violating Shmitta. It will not save the merchant, but I have no solution for that issue. Okay, so far we know that the stuff has to be consumed either by a human or by an animal, and there are three ways of consumption. Now, let's see the ramifications of this. The Chazon Ish, one of the all-time big names, especially in the halachot of Eretz Yisrael, because he lived in Bnei Brak, points out as follows. Nireh, it would seem, it seems to be prohibited to eat moldy bread. Now you're wondering who wants to eat moldy bread, but if that's because we're all wealthy, we're all affluent, Baruch Hashem, the economy is singing along nicely at the moment. But if you lived in times of great poverty and all you had was moldy bread to eat, that's what you would be eating, I suppose. But if it's bread of the Shemitah year, the wheat or the other ingredients in the bread came from the Shemitah year, you cannot eat it if it is moldy. Chashib have said that's not a normal way of consuming bread when it is moldy. Kevan she'ra'ui l'beheima, since the moldy bread is still perfectly fine to feed to animals, Asur have said, so it's not human food, it's not animal food, and must be fed to animals. The rule is as follows: any food, any beverage, anything which is fit for human consumption must be consumed by humans. If you have a household pet, you cannot feed your household pet table scraps which are fit for human consumption. Similarly, the farmer would not be allowed to do that. On the other hand, anything which is fit for only for animal consumption, cannot be eaten by humans. This, of course, leaves a middle area. There are some things which either humans or animals would eat, and therefore good for both. Now, when I say both animals and humans would eat it, the decision here cannot be left in the hands of the animals. The animals are not rabbinic scholars. What establishes whether or not something is fit for human consumption or whether it's fit only for animal consumption, that's the humans have to decide that. Any food that you would not feed to animals must be eaten by humans. Any food that you would not feed to humans must be eaten by animals. Foods which you would feed to both can be eaten by both. That's the rule of the Chazon Ish, and that is the widely accepted practice. Now, this leads us to another issue. I'm quoting the Aruch HaShulchan, one of my all-time favorite svarim, the Aruch HaShulchan, written by Rav Yehiel Michal Epstein. In a sense, this sefer is the opposite of the Shulchan Aruch. That's why he flipped the words. It's the Aruch HaShulchan. The Shulchan Aruch just gives you the bottom line psak, the bottom line conclusion, without all the sources and the analysis. The Aruch HaShulchan, written just over 100 years ago, I think actually the first volume was published in 1910. So the first volume came out just 100 years ago. no, but around 10, no, more over 100 years ago. It took around 15 years for all. In any event, early 20th century, he, following the order of the Shulchan Aruch, discusses for every halacha the sources, the opinions of the great Rishonim, the opinions of the great Acharonim. He gives you the whole source picture and the underlying concepts, and then comes to his conclusions. But in a sense, it's the opposite of the Shulchan Aruch. Instead of just giving you the conclusions, he goes back to all the sources and reasons. In any event, he says as follows. Od Matzina, we find as follows. Asur lishanot otam mebriatan. One is not allowed to change the form of Shmitta fruits and vegetables. That's what the Rambam wrote. Lo yishana perot mebriatan. The Rambam wrote, you're not allowed to change the form of the vegetable. You're not allowed to change the form of the fruit. What does that mean? That means davar shedarko le'achol chai, anything which is normally eaten raw, uncooked, lo yochlenu mevushal, you shouldn't eat it cooked. And similarly, anything which is normally eaten cooked, you should not eat raw. Examples are simple and straightforward. Lettuce is usually eaten raw. You might have some unusual recipe that calls for cooking lettuce. I suppose there are such recipes. If it's Shmitta lettuce, you cannot cook it in a recipe. Potatoes are normally eaten cooked, baked, roasted, but surely not raw. I frequently use raw potatoes, dice them very fine, add a little bit of finely diced potatoes to a salad. I think adds good texture and flavor to the salad, but that's unusual. Potatoes are usually cooked, and therefore, if I have Shmitta potatoes, then I cannot eat them raw. They have to be cooked. And this we learn from the verse, Kadosh tiyeh lachem, b'haviata teheh. The tihiyeh, the sanctity, the kedusha must be as it is, either raw or cooked, whatever is the normal way of using it. Shvi'it Tosafot damim. From this we learn also that not only must fruits and vegetables be eaten raw or cooked, depending upon what is normal, but we also learn that kedusha is tofes damim. What does that mean? It means that, well, we already know that you're not allowed to sell the holy produce of the Shemitah year. We already know that. What happens when someone does do it, which unfortunately happens? The money that the merchant receives acquires the kedusha of Shemitah. You've exchanged produce for money. Part of that exchange transfers the kedusha of the produce onto the money. Now the money has kedusha of Shemitah, and that money can only be used to buy fruits, vegetables, or something to rub on the skin. That money now has kedusha, and if someone sells kedusha produce in the market, and then those coins go into his or her cash register. If we're talking about Machane Yehuda, of course, it's only his cash register. They don't allow women to work there. Well, now those kedusha coins are getting mixed up with all the other coins, and that is a big problem. During the Shemitah year, any coins you have in your pocket might very well have come from a merchant, where it went through the hands of a merchant at one point in the past, where he sold holy produce of the Shemitah year. The kedusha is now on the coins, and you might very well have some of those coins in your pocket or your pocketbook right now. And that's a problem. That's a problem for which there is a straightforward solution. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. And of course, even though the money acquires the kedusha of Shmitta, the fruits are still kodesh. It's not that the fruits lost their kedusha. It just means that the money gains kedusha. In any event, lo yishaneh otam briatan. You're not allowed to change the form of the fruits and vegetables. You cannot change it into money. Unfortunately, people do that. And if it's raw, you have to eat it. Normally eaten raw, you have to eat it raw. If it's normally eaten cooked, you have to eat it cooked. Cooked means roasted, fried, and anything which is not raw. And of course, there's a middle area of produce which is sometimes eaten raw, sometimes eaten cooked. Cucumbers and lettuce are almost always eaten raw. Potatoes and rhubarb are almost always eaten cooked. Some things are eaten both ways, like apples or celery. It's quite common to put celery into the soup. It's quite common to eat celery raw. Apples are quite commonly eaten raw, quite commonly baked, used in apple pie and so forth. The middle category of produce, which is commonly used in both forms, cooked and raw, well, it's okay for you to use it either cooked or raw, whichever you wish. Those are the principles of Isur Shinui. You're not allowed to change the fruits from their normal form. This opens up a big problem. The big problem is Shmitta, squeezing fruits and vegetables for their juice, juicing fruits and vegetables. Now, this is a big problem. Before we begin analyzing this problem, let me mention that there are two examples, and only two examples, which are clearly acceptable for squeezing, and they are, number one, grapes, and number two, olives. When the juice is squeezed, or the olive oil is pressed, we call this juice, we call that olives, but in concept, it's the same. It's the liquid that comes out of the fruit, whether you call it a juice or you call it an oil, or it's just a matter of terminology, but in concept, it's the same. The Torah speaks a lot about wine and olive oil, and therefore we know for sure that olives can be pressed for their oil. Olives of the Shmitta year can be pressed for their oil, and the grapes of the Shmitta year can be pressed for their juice. That we know for sure. But what about all other fruits and vegetables, whether it's oranges or carrots that get juiced or anything else? Let's see the opinion of Reb Shlomo Carlebach. He was, if not the leading, one of the leading rabbis of Yerushalayim in the 20th century. And he writes as follows: Hatam, the reason, she'asur l'schot peirot truma, the reason that you're not allowed to change truma fruits into juice. Now, when you separate trumot and maserot, the truma that you separate, which in theory should go to the kohen, but we don't have kohanim nowadays who are ritually pure and can eat it, so it ends up not getting eaten at all. But the truma fruits have many of the same halachas as Shmitta fruits and vegetables. Truma produce is very similar in its halachas to the halachas governing produce of Shmitta. And therefore, the poskim are constantly bouncing back and forth between the two halachas, which are valid regarding truma produce, are in general equally valid regarding Shmitta produce. And why is it prohibited to squeeze a truma orange or apple or carrot. Why is that prohibited? Afilu, meaning omdim l'schita, even if it's a kind of fruit or vegetable which is normally squeezed, and even if the normal way to consume it is in the juice form, still it's prohibited to juice it. Why? Here a Pashut, it seems obvious. Rav Shlomo Zalman writes, Mishum de kevan de kaimelan de mashkin hayotzin min haperes chashive zeya ba'alma. Because the status of juice or oil that comes out of fruits and vegetables has the status of zeya ba'alma, the status of a mere secretion. And therefore, shatan zar loket. Therefore, if we're talking about truma produce and an orange, and a non-kohen drinks the truma orange juice, well, it's prohibited. He's not allowed to do that. But it's only juice. He's not eating truma fruits. He's only eating the juice. Therefore, no punishment, no penalty for the Jew who eats that. But it's still prohibited. Bottom line, by squeezing, by pressing, by juicing the produce, Megara Truma, you lower the status of the fruit. It no longer has the same status as the raw fruit. And according to Mabit, this is the explanation for why you're not allowed to squeeze it. Now, let me elaborate so you understand the underlying thinking here. Everyone knows that the bracha on an apple is perpetuates. Oh, but if you squeeze the juice from it, all of a sudden the bracha of the apple juice is shakol yibin. Well, that's simple enough proof that one has lowered the status. Before it was pre-ha'etz. Now it's just simple shakol yibin. The same thing about any other produce, fruit or vegetable which you are juicing. Simply prohibited. According to this, changing the fruit or vegetable from its bracha status, before it was by priyadama, before it was by perpetuates, and now by processing it, juicing it, you've turned it into shakol nidmiyah. That act of juicing is prohibited. That's a prohibited change. The fruit has to be eaten in a way that it will have its proper bracha, brei priya eitz or brei priya adama. Changing it into shakol nidmiyah is not allowed. Bottom line, in modern agriculture, unlike in the days of the Rishonim, unlike in the days of Chazal, in modern agriculture, they grow many different zanim, many different kinds of oranges. Farmers know that there are different zanim, different kinds of oranges, which are grown for different purposes. Same thing with grapes, same thing with everything else. There are some grapes, certain kinds of grapes, which are grown to be table grapes. There are other kinds of grapes which are grown to make grape juice or wine. Same thing with oranges. Some oranges are a certain species, a certain strain of orange, which are grown for selling as fruit. It's a different zon, a different strain, a different kind of orange, which is grown for juicing. Some fruits are grown for juicing, and that's a modern phenomenon in modern agriculture. Regarding this, we get ourselves into a little bit of a quandary, and some decisions are going to have to be made in order to be consistent in your practice. Reb Shlomo Zalman concludes, Mutar l'schot pri shvi'ita omed l'schita, it's a kind of orange, the kind of grape which is grown for juicing. It's that strain, a different kind of grape. Those oranges can be juiced. That's what he says. But this creates a conceptual problem. This creates a conceptual problem as follows. When we establish the correct bracha on a fruit or vegetable, perpetuates or perpetuates, the correct bracha applies to the fruit or vegetable in its prime form. If one juices the apple loses its prime bracha, the perpetuates, the fruit of the apple tree is the apple, not the juice. And therefore it's the apple that gets the bracha perpetuates and not the juice, because it's the apple which is the perpetuates, the fruit of the tree. But what about an apple tree, which is a different kind of apple? The apples were never grown for marketing as table fruit. The apples were grown entirely, it's a different kind of apple. The apples were grown for marketing to juice factories. Well, if it's a juice apple, a juice orange, the farmers know the difference, and of course, the factories which buy these things for squeezing will, of course, buy the kind of orange, the kind of apple which is appropriate for them for squeezing, that has to do with their profit margins. If the entire fruit exists for its juice, then it turns out that the juice is the prime product of the tree. The juice is the perpetuates. And someone who chooses to just to eat one of those apples, someone who wishes to eat one of those oranges, that's not the normal way that kind of orange is eaten. It's normally drunk as juice. That's not the way that kind of apple is consumed. The apple or the orange would become shakol b'ducharo, and the fruit is the perpetuates. Well, some consistency is called. You have to make some decisions about how you're going to structure your brachot. I'll give you an example of the difficulty, and once you understand the difficulty, you'll know how difficult it is to decide this issue. Think about chocolate. Chocolate is a bean, grows on a tree, but no one eats chocolate. I suppose there's some unusual people who eat chocolate beans, but it's very unusual. The normal way that the cocoa bean is consumed is in a bar of chocolate. Tons of bars of chocolate are consumed every day. I wouldn't be surprised if the total number of cocoa beans that are eaten every day as beans vanishingly small number, if any. I don't know if any get eaten that way. Same thing with coffee, incidentally. The coffee bean grows on a tree, but there are people who eat coffee beans. You can roast the coffee beans and eat them. You can eat them, and some people do. But that's unusual. The vast majority, close to 100% of the coffee crop, the way to consume it is by drinking a cup of coffee. Well, some decisions have to be made. What bracha are you going to pronounce on a chocolate bar? What bracha are you going to pronounce on a cup of coffee? If you are the unusual, maverick person, and it seems sort of bizarre, I know, it is a very maverick, unusual practice, but I even know people who do this, who indeed pronounce the bracha borei peri ha'etz on a chocolate bar, because that is the prime product of the cocoa tree. And these people also say borei peri ha'etz before drinking coffee, because that is the prime product of the coffee tree. And these people, if they would be offered a coffee bean, a roasted coffee bean to eat, some people do eat them. If they would be offered a cocoa bean to eat. I have no idea what it tastes like. Then they would say shakoni bidvaro, and the beans. well, if you are following this maverick, unusual practice, well, there are some people out there who do it, then you are saying that fruits and vegetables, which are planted and grown for their juice is the way the produce is consumed, and therefore juicing it for Shmitta is perfectly acceptable. If, on the other hand, you are following the normal majority common practice of saying shakoni nihya bidvaro on a chocolate bar and shakol nihya bidvaro on a cup of coffee, which is by far the most common practice, then you are saying that the liquid version is still subsidiary and not considered. You are not considering it the prime product of the tree, and therefore, even if the fruit or vegetable is intended for juicing in Shmitta, you're not allowed to do that. So we have, therefore, two practices out there. There are people who are indeed juicing oranges, and there are people who are buying. Well, I hope they're not paying for it. There are people who are acquiring, maybe juicing the oranges themselves. Well, that's okay if you hold that the juice is the prime product of the tree. But then you should be saying perpetuates on the fruit and shakoni bidvaro on the fruit if you eat the fruit whole. So some decisions have to be made. Of course, good advice is in general to follow the majority view. Good advice is in general to follow the majority practice. And in this case, the overwhelming majority practice is to say shakol nihya bidvaro on the liquid forms, and therefore not to allow the juicing of Shmitta produce. Those who, for whatever reasons, have chosen to follow the maverick view, there's no objection to that, and it's okay.
And
Now,
that
yes.
the primary product of the fruit, of the tree is still, let's say, the coffee itself, but still make a shahakol, or is the bracha itself signifying saying you're saying primary?
First, one must decide what the ikar, what the primary fruit of the tree is. For example, there are many trees where you eat different parts of the tree. People eat olives, people eat olive leaves. Which is the prime product of the olive tree? I think everyone will agree it's the olives and not the leaves. Therefore, it's the olives that get the bracha perpetuates and not the leaves. Well, the same thing is true with chocolate and coffee and oranges. You must decide what is the primary product of the tree. That gets the bracha perpetuates and nothing else. Okay. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan, whom we quoted before, has a very lenient view on this issue. And people who are following this view, yesh lahem al ma l'smoch, this is an opinion which one can rely upon. He says as follows: it's permissible to make beer and yayin saruf, that's brandy, misorim, from barley, afal pisha sa'ara be'ikar omedes l'pas, even though barley is usually used for baking and cooking. If you want to make a liquid out of it, you want to make beer or a distillate spirits and make brandy out of it, that's okay. That's okay, he says. Yera'eli demuter, I think it's okay, he says. Kamo zaitim vanavim, shasim mem yayin b'shaman. Just like we permit, this is a lenient view, disagreeing with everything we saw before. Just as it's okay to change olives and grapes into liquid, similarly, it's okay to change barley from its solid form into a liquid form. Kidetnan, and the reason for this is a Mishnah that we find in the tractate Truman. Right? Poskim constantly compare the laws of Truman with the laws of Shmitta. Hatara amra beferush kol chelev yitzah kol chelev tirosh. The Torah flat out permits olive oil and grape juice or wine. The Vadai Hatam, surely the reason why the Torah permits that, Shedarkan B'chach, because it's the ordinary way of consuming olives and grapes. Grapes have a very short season. Well, they used to have a very short season where they are fresh. Eating fresh grapes nowadays with modern agriculture and with imports, the grape season lasts for around 2 months nowadays. But until quite recently, the grape season with ripe grapes lasted approximately 2.5 weeks. There were 2.5 weeks where you could buy fresh grapes, and that was it. Same thing with olives. Fresh olives are available only for a very brief period of time. The only way to preserve the grapes, the only way to preserve the olives, to give them a long shelf life, is to turn them into olive oil or wine. Then they have long shelf life, or to pickle the olives. In the olive business, they call it killing the olive. What ordinary people would call pickling the olive, and then it'll also have a long shelf life. But the Torah flat out permits olives and grapes to be preserved, even though that means changing them into liquid, olive oil and wine. And the Aruch HaShulchan is of the opinion that that principle applies to other fruits and vegetables, other fruits and vegetables which are normally eaten in liquid form. So people who are lenient regarding the juicing of these fruits and vegetables which are frequently normally juiced have what to rely upon, and you're going to have to decide yourself whether you want to take the lenient or the strict opinion on this. Now, bottom line, there are 3 ways that one can be guilty of changing the form of the fruit in a prohibited way. You can do it via dime. You can, with your hands, put the lettuce into the pot and put the pot onto the fire. That's directly changing the form of the lettuce. You can do it via dime. All the posts can hold that that's prohibited. Alternatively, miniat ma'aseh shimur. On the other hand, another way to change the status of the fruits and vegetables is to just ignore them and avoid preserving them. Just let the tomato sit by itself in a quiet place, and it will change itself into animal food without you having to do anything. You can preserve the tomato by putting it into the refrigerator. It'll last longer, but you're not required to do that. You can just leave the tomato somewhere, and by itself, it will be mitkalkel. It'll ruin itself. First, it'll turn into animal food, and eventually it'll turn into no food at all, not even fit for feeding to animals. This is permissible if you are just refraining from preserving the produce and it spoils by itself, all is well. Okay, so we have a prohibited category, changing things biyadayim, actively with your own hands, putting the lettuce in the pot and putting the pot on the fire. We have a permitted category where basically you're doing nothing and you're just refraining from putting the tomato in the refrigerator, and it will spoil by itself and rot all by itself. There's a middle category of gram kilkul, indirectly causing the fruits to be spoiled. For example, putting the tomato in a place where it will spoil quicker. Putting the tomato in a warm, damp place so that it will spoil faster. Well, just by putting it there, you can snatch it out a few hours later and it's still fine. But you did put it in a place where it will speed the rotting process. This is grumma. This is indirectly causing the ruination of the fruit and vegetable. And this is controversial. Some posts can permit it, other posts can don't permit it. My personal feeling is that we have the merit of the keeping Shmita year. We have the merit of the mitzvah of Shmita rarely, once every 7 years. And my personal feeling is that, that since we live in such a wealthy, affluent society where we don't have to ask ourselves, am I going to eat or not eat the moldy bread? My personal feeling is it makes sense in general to always take the strict view on Shmita unless you have a very powerful reason for taking the lenient view. That's my personal opinion, because having once in 7 years the merit to fulfill the mitzvah, I want to be able to fulfill the mitzvah according to all the poskim, and therefore I take the stricter view. There are only two more issues that we have to discuss as far as how to treat the produce of the Shemitah year. One is you can't give it to a non-Jew. Right? Of course, you cannot give it to a non-Jew because a non-Jew, first of all, might not treat it in the proper way. But even if a non-Jew does treat it in the proper way and eats the apple raw, or eats the lettuce raw, or eats the potato cooked, even if the non-Jew eats it in the proper way, there's no mitzvah in that. He's a non-Jewish person. And therefore, we've removed the mitzvah from the produce by giving it as a gift or selling it to a non-Jew. We've eliminated the mitzvah element of it because it's a mitzvah for us to eat it. It's a mitzvah for Jews to eat the holy fruits of the Shemitah year. And by delivering the fruit or vegetable to a non-Jew, you've eliminated the mitzvah, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. And of course, in those merchants, whether it's Mahne Yehuda or any supermarket, any merchant who's selling fruits of the Shemitah year, they sell it also to non-Jews who walk in and buy it. I know of no basis for leniency. I have no basis. I know of no reason why that should be permitted, but unfortunately, that's what's happening. The last issue is delivering the holy fruits of the Shemitah year to what the Mishnah and Gemara call Am Haaretz. Nowadays, when people say Am Haaretz, they mean someone who is an ignoramus. But the technical meaning of the word Am Haaretz in halachic literature is someone who does not know the halachas, not a general, all-category ignoramus, but someone who doesn't know the halachas. That's an Am Haaretz, which clearly includes most non-Torah observant Jews, and even includes a few Torah observant Jews. Now, what the Rambam says is, Kishem she'asur la'asot schora b'perot shvi'it l'shomran, just like you're not allowed to market the holy produce of the Shemitah year, kach asur likach me'am haaretz. You're also not allowed to buy holy fruits from an Am Haaretz, from someone who doesn't know the halachas, because the money is going to acquire Kedusha. And now that those coins are in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to handle them properly, and those coins are just going to go into general circulation, you're not allowed to buy from an Am Haaretz. Afilu kol shu, not even the smallest amount. Shema lo yochal otam b'kedusha shviyas. We're also afraid that if you deliver the holy fruits of the Shemitah year, either by selling them or giving them as a gift to someone who doesn't know how to keep the Kedusha, well, they'll end up treating the fruits and vegetables incorrectly. They'll end up feeding it to an animal when it's still fit for a human. They'll end up tossing it in the rubbish when it's still fit for animal consumption. They'll end up using it in an incorrect way. Therefore, one is not allowed to give holy fruits and vegetables in the Shmitta year to a non-Jew, not allowed to give, not allowed to sell, and similarly, not allowed to give or sell even to a Jewish person who does not know how to take care of them properly. Rashi says that the reason is if you give kedusha fruits or vegetables to a Jewish person who doesn't know the halachas, we're afraid he might sell it, or we're afraid he might not destroy it when the time comes. The destruction of produce in the Shemitah year is an absolute requirement, is an absolute mitzvah, but it begins when the crops are no longer in the fields. At the time that all of the grapes have been harvested and there are no longer any grapes growing in the vineyards, then any remaining grapes from previously must be destroyed. It's going to be around 8-9 months until we get to that problem, and therefore we're going to delay the discussion but we're afraid that the Amaretz is not going to destroy them at the proper time, and we're afraid that they might come and sell it. If you think about it for a moment, neither of these problems pertains to a non-religious Jew or an ignorant Jew who is a guest in your home. A guest in your home, you're serving a plate of whatever it is, and part of what you're serving has the holiness of Shmitta. Well, there's no way that your guest is going to end up selling it, and there's no way that your guest is going to fail to destroy it 6 or 7 months from now when the time comes. And therefore, if it's a guest in your home, no particular problem in serving a Jewish guest in your home fruits and vegetables in the Shemitah year. A non-Jewish guest in your home, in some parallel universe where it's conceivable that you might have a non-Jewish person in your house, a non-Jewish person in your house, you cannot feed, you cannot offer the food which has the holiness of the Shemitah year, because when the non-Jew eats it, there's no mitzvah in that, and you've therefore eliminated the mitzvah, which you're not allowed to do. A Jewish person has to consume it. There's one big exception, as the Tosafot explains, that if you're running a hotel, and part of your hotel is that the customers are paying for a room and they're also paying for breakfast, a single global payment covers the room and breakfast or food. Back in the old days, so all the meals were provided by the hotel, or in the other situations in which that might be true. If the owner of the hotel or the rooming house is providing food as part of the payment, then indeed it's okay to give the Shemitah produce to non-Jews or to non-religious Jews who are staying at the hotel or renting a room in the rooming house, and part of the deal is that they get fed. That's okay, because once you enter into the relationship of renting a room to the non-Jew in your hotel, part of the obligation you've entered into is providing breakfast. Now it becomes a mitzvah for you to provide food for breakfast for that person, or whatever other meal is part of the deal, and therefore you're allowed to serve them even holy fruits and vegetables in the Shemitah year. Similarly, if you have a non-Jewish employee or a non-Jewish or a Jewish employee who's not Torah observant, and part of the deal is that the part of the salary is that not only is the worker going to be paid salary money, but part of the deal is that the employee will be provided meals, Now, providing meals becomes an obligation of the employer. It's therefore a mitzvah to supply those meals, and those meals can be supplied even if they contain holy fruits and vegetables in the Shmitta year. Okay, with this, we've covered the basic principles of how to deal with Shmitta fruits and vegetables. Next time, we're going to turn to the topic of what to do with peels and leftovers from the table. And then we're going to proceed to other issues which come up during the Shmitta year. And once again, if you have any topics which you wish to cover in general halacha, send me an email. You have my email on chat. If there are specific issues in Shmitta which you want to cover, feel free to send me an email and we'll cover those. But first, we're going to have a few more weeks on Shmitta, and then we'll turn to more general issues. So until next week, I wish you a good week and eventually a Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to seeing you all again a week from today. Until then.
Do you have a minute for a question?
Sure. Okay, Miriam is first. Yes.
Hi. Thank you very much for the info. I feel like you ran through very quickly the coins in the shuk. I do a lot of shopping in the shuk. So does that mean that I should be giving them exact change when I buy something? Or I should have a special purse that I put the change in that they give me?
I
and
like
only
to.
use.
I have two recommendations. If either of my two recommendations is practical, take it. Practical solution number one would be don't pay at all. Instead, just give them a credit card.
Oh,
There are no coins. It's only electrons in the bank.
okay.
So if using a credit card works, go for it.
Okay.
Second solution, if using a credit card is impractical, my advice would be, in addition, buy at least two products at the same time, one of which does not have Kedusha, and then have in mind that you're paying for the product without Kedusha, and the other should be the Havla'ah, just swallowed up in the sale. That's what the Gemara recommends for etrogim.
But what about the change that I'm getting?
Yeah, well, not only that change, any change you get from any merchant anywhere in Israel might at some point in the past have been in the till in Mahane Yehuda, where they're selling. Once it goes into general circulation, it can be all over the place. And there is no simple solution for that, but to take a deep breath, exhale slowly and relax, and hope that as long as the majority of coins in the marketplace are not Shmitta, all will be well.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have other issues, other questions now? Let's pause here, and then Yetz Hashem will continue next week. Shalom.
Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you for participating.
Rabbi Fink,
Yes, Nechama.
You did. May I thank you for the tefillas for my friend Nechama? That was very special. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Some of that money,
My pleasure.
most of
Rabbi.
that money for Shabbat.
Again, who's
Some of
speaking?
that money is meant for Yeshivat Simchat.
Very good.
Oh,
Shmuel.
if you have a bundle of, let's say, sage or whatnot, and you want to turn it, and
I'm not getting good reception for some reason. I don't know. It's
Shmuel, the sound isn't working good. Send me an email with your question, Shmuel, okay? Okay. Shalom.
um,